Thank you for having me. This is my first time in Morocco. Don't speak Arabic or French, so please bear with me. I'm trying to learn. I think I'm getting pretty good. What I want to talk to you about today is, I'm a cell and development biologist, and especially for you students, where you pick these degrees or focuses, and sometimes we don't always know what we're going to use it for, especially in science. You're dealing with cells, you're extracting from animals, and we don't always know the true definition of translation. Translation is what's brought my expertise all around the world. So what I'm going to share with you today, I really hope that you gravitate towards the bigger picture of why we do science. I want to give a special thank you first to Chairman Dr. Tabialoui. Sorry, okay. And of course, Dr. Hannah Abdelmoumen, who invited me here all the way from the United States. Special thank you to them, and of course the organizers and everybody here at the university and Congress. So this is my team at Vanderbilt University. We're a small group. We're in Nashville, Tennessee, so about 3 hours from Georgia. Most of you probably heard of Atlanta, Georgia. We're very cellular focused, so a lot of our work is in vitro, of course. We're a cardiology lab, so we look at the development. I'm in cell and development biology, of course, so we look at the development embryonically to where cells divide and later turn into cardiac myocytes. So right now we're studying a mice model. We do a lot of induced pluripotent stem cell work. And I have a team in the Caribbean where we're working on monkeys. We do a lot of green monkey work as well, which is really cool. This is our most recent publication. We look at a lot of proteins that mimic different drug mechanisms. So for instance, if you look here, you can see in a wild type, and you can't see very good, unfortunately, but there's perfect structure, and then when you knock out SNF protein, and not to get too scientific, you'll see that it's very blurry. That's not the microscope, that's actually deficit in development of the cardiac myocytes. And what we try to do is mimic what we see in cells with the drugs that we use in real life. So we started a program called Cardio-Oncology, where we look at different chemotherapies and we look at their mechanisms, and found that over 20% of humans that were receiving chemotherapies were dying of heart disease. So this cardiotoxicity that we see in chemotherapies, we're seeing a lot of overlay with our SNF knockouts. And that's just to introduce you to some of the work I'm doing. I'm also working with a group in the Dominican Republic where this is actually a story on us, where we study scorpion venom. So scorpion venom for cancer, we've done all the clinical trials, the FDA loves it. We recently repurposed for COVID-19. We did 2 clinical trials down there. Again, the FDA loves it. I can't tell you why it was not approved. But this is also a natural resource, right? There are more natural resources than plants, and this is another one that we're looking at. So of course, I don't have time to go into all the projects that I'm working on. I'm working in 11 labs all around the world, from Israel, United States, Dominican Republic, Colombia, Philippines, and all of them are different projects and different focuses. So what I want to talk to you about today is about cannabis and how I found cannabis and cannabinoids. I am a mother of 5 children, and when I was working on all of these studies, my 3rd child, his name is Macario, he ended up having a stroke at birth, and he was having 200 seizures a day. So if you look in this video here, this is my son when he was 5 months old, so he was very young. He was on 7 seizure combinations, ketogenic diet. They gave him a medically induced coma. And when he turned 5 months old, he had a surgery that's actually never been done before, where they removed all of his left occipital lobe and all of his left temporal lobe. So he's pretty much missing 40% of his left brain. They wanted to do a hemispherectomy on him because at such a young age, the brain is not developed. However, we collaborated with the Yale pediatric neuroscience team. And again, this is a surgery that has never been done before. So what does that mean for development? On the left occipital lobe, that's your visual processing center, spatial and depth perception, object and face recognition, memory. And your temporal lobe is important for processing, memory again, verbal and speech sounds, and the ability to comprehend. So when my son turned 6 months old, missing 40% of his brain, he was still very much like a newborn baby. He had none of these functions. He was also paralyzed on the right side of his body. We were told he would be paralyzed because he was missing so much of his left brain. So, that's when I started to, as researchers, we don't just go in the lab and play around with chemicals. That's when I started to read about medical cannabis. And the cannabis that was currently on the market was not something that I was willing to risk on my own child. So I started to really play with the delivery. A lot of what Dr. Mignani talked about and the importance of delivery and limiting toxicities and ensuring efficacy. How do you do that with compounds that come from cannabis? That was more so my focus. And which cannabis compounds did I want to use? A lot of what is available in the United States are extracts. So not only do you have CBD, you have THC, and you have 150 other cannabinoids and terpenes, and I just wasn't willing to risk that on my son. I was already going to use him as an experiment. So I created my son a medicine. I told nobody. When he turned 7 months old, he was feeding out of a G-tube, and I pumped this cannabis oil that I created for him in the lab. And he ended up, his right eye, which we could never see, his right eye started to come into view. I'm actually going to switch over to here. So, okay, his right eye came into view, and then 2 months later he started crawling. And by 14 months old, after being paralyzed at 7 months old, he started walking. So this is him walking. And again, he's missing 40% of his brain. That's his daddy. And what I had thought about the entire time was, how can my son be doing this? He is missing 40% of his brain. So what is going on? I took him off all medications. He was on 7 neurological medications, and he was only using the cannabis oil that I created for him. So I thought about connections. I thought about neuroplasticity. I thought about the ability of the brain to adapt. The brain is the mothership, of course, and so, we have to think of its ability to compensate for areas that are missing, especially in a developing young child. And then I thought about the medications that he was on, and of course, never really thought this way as a cell biologist, and realized that a lot of the medications were simply Band-Aids to prevent symptoms from happening, but they were inhibiting neurodevelopment. So that's something that I wanted to definitely get away from. And as we heard from Dr. Sharif this morning, a majority of medications we don't even think about that are FDA approved, those compounds once came from plants. We don't even think of that because even in the lab, we just see powders. And then of course in the pharmacy, you just see pills. So the ability to really think about how a lot of these plants can scientifically become our medicine has been around for way longer than we even realize. And so why did I do this for my son? Well, of course, you know, I have a lot of faith. I believe God wanted me to be a scientist for this very reason. It was not just to stop the seizures. It was not just to heal the 40% brain that he is missing. And it was not only because I would hope that the brain would compensate for the areas that are lost, but I hope that it could do all of the above, and that's how incredible cannabis is. Today my son is 6 years old. He just graduated from kindergarten. He has no developmental deficits. He's still missing 40% of his brain. He's walking, he's talking, he's playing, and he's perfectly normal. We thank God. So this is me and him. So if you Google Manalo Morgan, he's amazing. I bring him with me everywhere, and I teach him about the positive aspects that the plant has done in his life. Not the recreational, not what you see on TV, not the partying, but the ability for a plant to become his medicine. And he's still young, he doesn't really understand, but you know, we have to start somewhere. If you guys remember, you might remember, some of you are too young, but in 1992 there was a movie called Lorenzo's Oil, and it was about a mother who was very frustrated. Her son had a brain neurodevelopment disorder, and she ended up trying cannabis oil, and it saved his life. My story came out in Forbes in 2018, and it was called A Modern Day Lorenzo's Oil. And it was the first story that Forbes agreed to write on about cannabis, because when I talk about cannabis, I don't talk about creating products or talk about making it available for everyone. I talk about doing the research and the science so that we can see more stories like Macario. And how many more stories do we have in cannabis? I mean, I'm sure you all have heard something. It helps me with anxiety, helps me with sleep, it helped my mom with her cancer. Whatever it is, there's a lot of stories. And so as I started to go through this process, I was thinking, what am I going to do now? What is my mission? And, sorry, excuse me. There we go, sorry about that. And my mission is that I firmly believe I was chosen. This was meant to happen to my son so that I can give everything to Macario to people across the world. And I can't do it alone. I don't know why this keeps doing this. I'll just stay over here and stop walking around so you don't have to hear my shoes. Okay. Okay, so I thought about neuroplasticity, and like I said, I'm working on actually over 11 clinical trials, and it all starts with the brain and the endocannabinoid system, and that's definitely something that we can get into, but this compartmentalization that we see in the brain is very plastic, meaning that it's very transferable from one compartment to another. The signaling that we want to see, sometimes it's just a matter of efficiency. So when you think of CBD, what does CBD do? It doesn't actually bind to any receptors, but it can enable processes to occur so that we can get efficient signaling. It's like water when you're dehydrated. It really just refuels a system that wants to provide homeostasis. And when you think about cannabinoids, this is just a few of the over 500, I think, cannabinoids that are out there. These are our favorite to study right now. Here's the problem. Even though you see all of these cannabinoids, in the last 3 decades, these are the only ones that are being actively studied at academia or a government lab. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of businesses and just people in general. We're very focused on the legalization of cannabis and seeing it happen, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So a lot of times when I go to different countries and speak, Again, I don't speak to try to sell products or ask people to grow the plant. I talk to them about being the foundation of doing a lot of the science that can encourage the pharmacology that will follow after. So our scientific initiatives is basically to be a leader in cannabinoid research through collaboration all around the world. And what we need to do is use traditional protocols. All of our opposers to cannabis are people that just want to see real data, traditional data. They want you to go from a phase 1 cell and molecular model to your in vivo and to provide that data before you go into patients and before you can start clinical trials. It's really that simple. And when you look at a clinical phase trial process, and most places all around the world kind of follow the same trajectory, where that first T0, basic science, you know, this phase really can take 10 years sometimes. But I feel like in cannabis, the data is so scattered. There's a lot of preclinical data. We just need focus. The funding needs to be focused on particular areas. And by the time you even get to humans, sometimes that's another 10 years, another $20 million. And so really in my mind, that's the gap of cannabis research. So we really need to follow this suit, and what we're doing is we found a way, since cannabis is legal in certain states and certain countries, we found a way to be able to do all of these phases in parallel. So we have a study that I'm going to tell you about in the UK where we'll do a full phase trial in less than 2 years. And this is just an example of some research that is going on. However, it kind of stops in its tracks. And these are your preclinical data that are starting to come out more and more, where we're focusing on mechanism, focusing on cell proliferation, and really trying to understand the cannabinoids and how they work. And then there's also, you know, placebo clinical trials that are being done all over the world. Here's the problem. So in 2019, we ran a metadata study with Yale University, and we are continuing that study now, and a lot of the data is the same, it just grew. And what we're finding is that within the data, there is a lot missing scientifically, and I think this is why we can't get cannabis legalized. So if you look at the quality levels of hierarchy, you know, from reviews to actually control trials, case studies, and the preclinical studies, the overwhelming majority of medical cannabis derived products which are commercially available do not currently publish any data to support their marketing claims. So basically, when you go to the store and buy CBD, there's no research on that particular product, there's no clinical trials, and that's happening over 95% of the time. So when people like me go to speak to your federal agencies, it's really hard because we don't have appropriate data. And a lot of the anti-cannabis groups are now allowed to say it's all anecdotal stories, there's not enough good data, there's too many unprofessionalism, unaccredited individuals handling products. In America, many people are making these products in their kitchen. So, you know, it's easy for people to say that this is a very recreational market currently, it's not medical, and so it's dangerous for the kids. And when we look at the numbers and go down the list here, our areas of interest were fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, neuropathy, chronic pain, epilepsy, and cancer. I mean, like, that's pretty much everything. All of them relate to something, right? Out of 6,689 studies. And this is just funneling down. So we initially had about 50,000 studies. So nearly out of 7,000, 4,300 were duplicates. So they were just published in another journal, or they were just utilizing the same data and they made reviews out of them. And then we did a title and abstract screening to really try to find credible data. And most of the inclusion criteria failed, and we only had 66 studies remaining after we did this metadata analysis. And that's a big problem. And today in 2022, we still have the same problem. So here are some of the currently FDA-approved medical cannabis products. And the funny thing is, some of these products have been medically approved for a while. They just don't promote it as being medical cannabis. We have Sativex, which is a combination of both THC and CBD. We have Marinol, which is actually a synthetically approved, and that's for HIV, weight loss, makes you very sleepy. Epidiolex is probably the most recent FDA approval, and that's for a certain type of epilepsy. Nabilone has actually been around a very long time, so they give that to patients who have really bad cancer symptoms and are undergoing that stress. And Ticagrelor, they have a few really good studies as well. I spent a year as Ticagrelor, Israel's chief scientific officer, shortly after what happened with my son. And so I was head of a few cancer trials and Crohn's disease, also an autism study where we had 900 patients approved on medical CBD. And we also had Alexa. So the take-home message of this is, after a one-year review, the focus is on patents. A lot of groups are just focused on getting products and publishing patents, and cannabis is very trendy, it's very popular, and there's a lot of money there. So a lot of groups are focused on that. Companies are publishing so that they can make a claim on their products. But that science is actually looked at very well, and we're able to dictate. I sit on some FDA panels, and we're able to dictate whether or not these groups should be making marketing claims. The problem is there's so many cannabis products. Synthetics are publishing a majority of peer-reviewed papers, and a lot of the clinical studies, you'll see 1 patient, 5 patients, very inconsistent data. Again, that's just a reason why we can't approve. And there are a few studies on natural cannabis. So here's what's really exciting. We're actually going to be running the first NHS-approved cannabinoid clinical trial with the University of Manchester in the UK. So this is going to be very exciting. We're going to do it on chronic pain. Surprisingly enough, when we were doing the patient recruitment, a majority of those patients came to us and had fibromyalgia. And when we started to look at the mechanisms of fibromyalgia and try to decide what formulation, what CBD or THC ratios we were going to use, we discovered that fibromyalgia is the disease that your doctor gives you if they don't know what's wrong with you. So you have a lot of pain, you have a lot of inflammation, you're depressed, you have a lot of anxiety. So we said, great, not only are we going to study chronic pain, we're going to be able to look at those data points as well. So we're really excited. And like I had mentioned to you guys, we're actually able to do a lot of the studies. Yes, that's me. We're able to do a lot of these studies in parallel. So right now, we've done all of the cellular toxicity studies, we've done efficacy studies, we've done in vivo, in mice, and so we're doing these studies while we're getting ready to go into patients. We have AI, we have a pain management app, and we're able to track pain, mental health, and inflammation all at the same time. And here's pretty much what the group at the University of Manchester feel. They feel a lot of the pain that we experience, and a lot of what happens inside of our body basically starts at the frontal lobe. So your perception, if I say to you, I'm going to pinch you right now, and it's really going to hurt. And I just pinched this guy, and it hurt so bad. He started crying and bleeding and everything. If I tell you that, you're going to get ready for me to pinch you because your perception is that this is really going to hurt. That drives certain processes that downstream are going to create issues. Of course, that's a very small example, but your perception is going to cause the processes that occur afterwards. So we were able to map using basically a new EEG technology. We're able to map where a lot of that pain comes from in certain individuals, and we're trying to pair certain cannabinoids and see what parts of the brain those cannabinoids light up in. And when we look at the current FDA-approved fibromyalgia prescriptions, of course you have everything from your SNR inhibitors, your antidepressants, gabapentinoids. A lot of these drugs focus neurologically, are also for anxiety, depression patients, and they focus on pain. So when we looked at the potential mechanisms of CBD, and CBD alone, a lot of those mechanisms overlap, actually more than one, so we figured, why not try CBD and see which mechanisms spark up. And the main question that everybody has, especially in America, I'm not sure here, is CBD the cure-all cannabinoid? Does it cure everything? People put it on their knees when they're in pain, they use it to sleep better, it cures cancer, it cures epilepsy, that's what you hear. And the truth is that all of these mechanisms that you see up here, all of these mechanisms actually are driven through the amount of CBD that we give somebody and the pairing of not just CBD with another cannabinoid, but maybe the pairing of CBD with another drug. So we've confirmed all of these mechanisms, and all of these mechanisms touch a different ailment or touch a different disease, from diabetes to Parkinson's to blood pressure to cardiac arrhythmias. So is CBD a cure-all? No, it can influence a lot of processes, but it's a very indirect and complicated process. So we need to understand which concentrations of these cannabinoids mediate either the activation or the inhibition at certain receptor sites. And so what we're learning too is that the delivery can either make an inhibition occur or an activation. So it really depends. I've had some people take CBD and tell me, oh my goodness, I have so much energy. What did you give me? This is awesome. And then other people that say, geez, this makes me drowsy and it makes me go to sleep. So it's the amount, and it truly is the fact that we are all different and that our receptor sites are all open in different ways and in different times. So we need to understand how to treat people in precision-based manner, not just with one prescription for one condition. And one addition of other cannabinoids, terpenes, and other compounds will also alter the effect. So the CBD deserves further rigorous mechanism and discovery, and that's a lot of what we're doing at Vanderbilt University. We're doing some studies in Australia, Canada, and many other labs where they're focusing specifically on mechanisms. This is our UK timeline that I just wanted to share. And I know it's small and you can't see it, but what I do want you to get out of this is where the live study starts. So a lot of what you guys work on, assign your posters outside, are the preclinical data that we need before we can even present to somebody like the NHS. And what we've been able to do is organize our protocol and organize the formulations that we want to use at the same time of doing the metadata that I showed you, understanding different cannabinoid compositions, choosing a delivery, dosing, safety, efficacy, figuring out if we're going to do a behind the counter versus an over the counter, and what is that differentiation. And once we have all that, we can go into patients. And so it really takes a lot of work, and definitely not to go into the data, but this is just like 1 day of work. And cellular toxicity, we're also studying humans at the same time. So that's what I kind of want you to get out of this, is that while we're doing work in cells, and I'm a cell biologist, we have to understand that there's a direct translation into humans. And so the highlights of this study, specifically in UK and Colombia, which is in Latin America, where we currently are growing organic cannabis and currently received EU manufacturing to be able to export to different places like Mali and the Netherlands and to Australia. But we've completed the comprehensive metadata analysis. We've done a lot of our cell toxicity testing, in vitro efficacy study testing. Happy to share that data on any of the points that you guys are more specifically interested in, because it's a lot. We're hoping to complete this project in October of this year. And we've also done in vivo dose tolerance studies in mice and in monkeys. So last, we just need to do the batch and stability testing for our formulations. We're really focused on filling in the gaps at the same time. So we are establishing a global education platform so that we could be educating. We're going to pair with the American Pharmacy Association so that we can create continuing education courses. Because at the end of the day, it's about education. If you ask any of your medical doctors right now, how much CBD should I take? Or what's the dose of THC I should use for sleep or for cancer? They don't know. So at the end of the day, we could be doing all of this science. We need to focus on the education. And so I just want to encourage you guys as students, but also as a community, to really focus on educating. This is a few pictures of me where I was in Ghana and helped the former president, Jerry Rawlings, relieve himself of Parkinson's disease. I was also teaching at the world's largest autism conference, and so based on the topic of the conference, we're able to translate our cellular data into these different conferences depending on their specific areas. That's me with the Minister of Health in Israel, where I help them create the dosing strategies. And then this is in Wisconsin at the Pharmacy Association. This is my family. I have 5 kids. My daughter's here today, sitting in the front. She's the oldest of 4 boys. This is Macario, who I mentioned is missing 40% of his brain. I'd like to give a special thank you to my friends for entertaining us while here in Morocco. It's definitely been an incredible, blessed time. You guys have a beautiful country, and I really look forward to coming back again. So thank you.